Have you ever had someone slap you in front of a room full of people? Not a stranger, but your own mother. I hadn't either, until March 15th, 2024. I was standing on a stage at one of Boston's most prestigious hotels, surrounded by 200 guests, judges, lawyers, old money families. And my mother had just handed me a stack of legal documents, demanding I sign over my $2 million penthouse as a wedding gift to my sister. When I said no, her palm connected with my face so hard that my earring flew across the marble floor. That was my reality. And instead of crying, instead of apologizing, I picked up that earring, walked out, and made one phone call. Within an hour, everything changed. Let me take you back 3 years, to where this all began. It was a Tuesday evening in March 2021. I was in my studio apartment eating leftover takeout and reviewing blueprints for a client when my grandmother's name lit up my phone screen. Margaret Harrison had been a Harvard law professor for 31 years. She didn't waste words. So when she told me she was updating her will and leaving me her penthouse in Boston's Seaport District, valued at over $2 million, I set down my chopsticks and listened. When I asked her why, she said simply, "Because you're the only one who visits. Every Sunday for 10 years, Claire. You bring me tulips because you remember they're my favorite. You sit with me when I have nothing interesting to say." I felt tears prick my eyes. She added quietly, "Your mother will not be pleased." That turned out to be the understatement of the decade. The news leaked within weeks. By April, my mother Diane had organized what she called a family discussion at her Beacon Hill home. I walked in to find my father Gerald, my mother, and my sister Stephanie arranged like a tribunal. Diane told me my grandmother wasn't thinking clearly. Stephanie cried theatrically about how unfair it all was. Gerald suggested I should decline the inheritance or split the proceeds equally among the family. The same Gerald who'd missed my college graduation for a golf tournament was now telling me what was fair. I told them no. The temperature in that room dropped 10 degrees, and Diane looked at me with cold, composed fury. "I hope you're prepared," she said, "for the consequences of being so selfish." Those consequences came swiftly. I was removed from the family group chat. I found out about Stephanie's engagement party through Instagram. When I asked Diane about it, she said she assumed I wouldn't want to come, that I'd been too busy with my little decorating business. My little decorating business had 12 active clients and had doubled its revenue that year. But to Diane Harrison, anything that wasn't a law degree or a wealthy husband was just a hobby. The worst part wasn't the exclusion. It was the story Diane began telling anyone who would listen, that I had manipulated my grandmother, that I had visited constantly to turn her against the family. She painted me as a predator, a schemer who exploited a confused old woman for profit, and through all of it, I stayed silent. I thought if I kept my head down, the storm would pass. I didn't understand yet that my silence was exactly what she was counting on. Then, one week before Stephanie's wedding, my grandmother called at 7 in the morning. Her voice carried an urgency I'd only heard a handful of times in my life. She told me to write down a phone number, her attorney, Nathan Cole. She said she'd prepared documents and that if anything happened at the wedding, I should call him immediately. "Your mother thinks I don't know what she's planning," Margaret said. "She forgets I was practicing law before she was born." She told me she loved me and hung up before I could ask another question. I saved Nathan's number and spent the next week wondering what I was walking into. March 15th, the Fairmont Copley Plaza. White orchids, crystal chandeliers, a 12-piece jazz ensemble. Every detail screamed expense and Diane's personal taste. 200 guests, all carefully curated from 3 decades of Boston social climbing. I wore navy blue, not too flashy, not too understated. Just me. I'd been there less than 10 minutes when Stephanie found me near the ice sculpture and asked if I'd brought the transfer documents for the penthouse. They had already decided I would comply. When I told her there were no documents and that I wasn't signing anything, her perfect smile flickered, and for a moment she looked exactly like our mother. "Mom's going to handle this," she whispered. "And when she does, don't say I didn't warn you." She was right. At 7:30, after the toasts, Diane stood at the head table with a microphone and a champagne flute and called me up onto the stage in front of everyone. She had a folder ready, a deed transfer with my name already typed on the signature lines. She framed it as a beautiful act of sisterly love. The room actually applauded. When I said no, she squeezed my shoulder and told me not to be nervous. When I said no again, louder, she called me ungrateful. Stephanie appeared and called me selfish. Gerald stared at the floor, and then Diane's hand moved so fast, I didn't see it coming. The slap snapped my head sideways and sent my earrings skidding across the marble with a sound like a small bell. The room went completely silent. I stood still for a moment, my cheek burning, my vision blurred, aware of every eye in that ballroom. Then I bent down, picked up the earring, straightened it carefully, and put it back on. I looked at my mother. "That's the last time you touch me," I said. My voice didn't shake. I was proud of that. Then I walked off the stage, through the tables, out the double doors, and into the lobby. I didn't run. I found a quiet corner, pulled out my phone, and called Nathan Cole. I told him the documents were needed. He told me Margaret would arrive within the hour. She walked through those doors at 8:45, 78 years old, moving with a cane, silver hair pinned back, wearing a gray cashmere coat. Everything about her radiated the presence that had made her one of Harvard's most formidable professors. Nathan walked beside her carrying a leather briefcase that looked like it contained the weight of the world. When I stood up and said, "You came," she took my face in her hands, examined my cheek, and said quietly, "Then let's finish this." We walked into the ballroom together. Diane saw her mother crossing that marble floor and went white. Margaret addressed the room clearly and calmly, confirming that the penthouse was mine, that the will was legal and valid, and that no other claims to the property existed. Then Nathan produced a second set of documents. In 2020, a Cape Cod property belonging to Margaret had been sold for $875,000. Margaret had never authorized that sale. She had been hospitalized for 6 weeks that fall, recovering from a broken hip. She could not have signed anything. A forensic analysis by a certified document firm had examined a signature on the sale paperwork. Their conclusion: probability of forgery 98.7%, and the entire file had already been forwarded to the district attorney's office. Diane started screaming denials. Gerald said he hadn't known that he'd signed whatever he was told to sign. Stephanie stood in her wedding dress watching her family collapse in real time, mascara running down her face. Brandon's parents exchanged the kind of significant look that signals a quick exit from someone else's disaster. Margaret looked at her daughter one last time and said, "I gave you 3 years to confess, to make it right. Instead, you spent those years calling my granddaughter a manipulator and calling me senile. Some things can't be allowed to continue." Then she turned and we walked out together. I didn't look back, not once. The fallout was swift. 2 weeks later, Diane was summoned to the district attorney's office. Her attorney withdrew from the case shortly after seeing the evidence. Gerald moved to the Ritz-Carlton. The charity gala Diane had co-chaired for 17 years, quietly uninvited her. The Boston Bar Association opened an ethics inquiry. A brief item appeared in the Globe's legal beat column about a prominent Boston attorney under investigation for document fraud. No names were printed. In a city like Boston, none were needed. 3 months after the wedding, I was sitting on a penthouse balcony, watching the sun set over the harbor. Margaret was beside me. She visits every Sunday now. We go to museums or we just sit here and talk. She told me that evening that she spent too many years keeping the peace, staying quiet to avoid conflict, letting things go because confrontation was painful. "I don't want that for you," she said. "I want you to speak the truth even when it's hard. Being kind doesn't mean being silent." I told her I would remember. She patted my hand and asked what was for dinner. This is my life now. A penthouse that's truly mine. A grandmother who shows up. A business that's growing, with real clients who respect my work. Boundaries that hold. I started therapy in April. I met someone, an architect named Ben, who has no idea who the Harrisons of Beacon Hill are and likes me for exactly who I am. And every day I'm learning what Margaret already knew. That love without respect isn't love. It's just habit. And you deserve both. If you're watching this and you've been told that protecting yourself is selfish, that setting limits makes you ungrateful, I want you to hear this clearly. You're allowed to want more. Protecting your peace is not a crime. It's a necessity. Thank you for staying until the end.